Hey friends, before we get going on today's episode today, I just wanted to pause and say I am so thankful for each and every one of you. I may not know your names, but I can see that I have people from all over the world that tune in on a weekly basis, and that is just so humbling to me. And I'm so thankful for the following that has kind of developed over these last few years, and I just have a lot of gratitude as we start today's episode. Now, out of that gratitude, I am letting you guys into this little world of the subscription. I'm actually going to play for you today our very first bonus episode. As a reminder, this bonus episode is tied to our subscription. So our very first subscribers heard this episode, but I wanted to play it today because first and foremost, I think it's very applicable to today, this period of time that we're in, and the importance of focusing on your practice vision. But also, I wanted to let you into the world of the subscription because January 1st of 2026, we are increasing our subscription prices. We knew we started it out incredibly low, and we are locking everybody in. So all of our current subscribers, you're safe with your subscription, where your price is not going up. But I also wanted to get everybody an inside peek at least the first bonus episode, where you get a lot of the vision behind the subscription. But also because I wanted you to have this as a gift. You are getting a bonus episode as just a regular everyday listener, but to also remind you that if you have been on the fence about whether to subscribe or not, please do so before the year ends so that you can lock in at the 2025 rates before we go up in January of 2026. So I'm going to drop you into this very first bonus episode, which aired about a year ago today. Enjoy. If you're listening to today's bonus episode, then that means that you have made a choice to become a member of the Managing Dental Drama community. So let me personally welcome you. I have no doubt that the people listening in are the best of the best in the dental field, and I feel honored to walk alongside you in your professional journey. Now, today's episode is meant to be very practical and give you some tangible next steps to take. Implementation is key, so I would encourage you to listen to this episode as many times as you need over the next 30 days. Now, it will expire, so make sure to take notes on anything that you need to implement over these next 30 days. Again, welcome to the community. I'm thrilled to have you.
Lady, do you know what we're doing today?
What?
This is the first, out of the gates, number one.
Yes.
I'm so excited.
I'm pumped.
And anybody listening, you guys are the creme de la creme.
You're the smart ones.
You're the smart ones, the first ones.
Yes.
To get our very first bonus episode.
Yep. Yes. I wish I could have the names of every single person listening, because you're the top of the top.
Yeah. We'd give you a shout out. And maybe you could have a background of fireworks.
We've arrived.
So we're super excited about doing this because our goal for these bonus episodes are to dive a little bit deeper into the topic and make sure that we are giving helpful to-dos. Because I think that's always been my bone to pick after any continuing education class or any webinar where I'm like, okay, but I'm still left floundering. That was all good in theory, but what am I doing? How am I executing this? And so the goal of these bonus episodes and items in our newsletter are meant to give you something to do to make it applicable right away.
Yes. Yes.
So I'm going to start this with, because we've had a theme here of your vision and your kind of culture and all of that, because it's really kind of the foundation of how decisions are made in the practice and how you move forward. Mm-hmm. And so here, we're near the end of October now, and I know you're going to hit us all with goal setting in January. I'm already dreading it, but that's kind of the key. So how can we really set our goals more effectively if we have our vision and our culture kind of in line. So it all kind of ties together, but it's to make it more systematic and practical and useful. I think this is absolutely the place to start. So actually, I'm going to put you on the spot here. You don't know I'm going to ask you this, but I'm putting you on the spot because I think it's a great parallel to what your advice is and asking us to do. And then you know, it's a good analogy, parallel, whatever you want, and kind of ties how universal the conversation can be, it should be. So it's not just us in our dental offices. This is applicable to whatever, you know, you're doing in life. So I'm putting you on the spot. What was your vision for this podcast?
So my vision was for it to be a wide-reaching podcast platform. Wide-reaching meaning I wanted information to get to people that I would never be able to work with. And I wanted it to be something that caused people to laugh and to realize that what they're going through is not an isolated incident, that there's other people that are actually experiencing the same thing. So I wanted that to be comforting to people, to be able to laugh, but also to realize, okay, this is happening elsewhere. But I think the third component of that is I really did want there to be practical takeaways that people could listen and feel comforted and laugh, but could also go, ooh, these are one or two things that I'm going to take away from that episode.
So from that vision, how has that informed the rest of your moves? Because we're on season 4 now. And so how is it what you wanted, and how has it helped you make certain decisions? And here we are with our bonus episode. So I'm going to assume the answer is yes.
Yes.
But can you fill in?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I would say up until the subscription, it's informed what not to do. So this is going to sound a little bit interesting, but there's a lot of different ways to make a podcast more visible. And one of those ways is to allow these advertisements to pop in. So there's a whole behind the scenes world that we won't get into, but basically people would pay essentially to be able to plop a little advertisement into our podcast. And that came thankfully pretty early on because we had some good volume. And so the platform we use is called Buzzsprout. Buzzsprout recognized that and was like, oh, let's pipe through some people that would be willing to pay to be on your podcast. And I rejected that early on because what I didn't want of the podcast is for it to feel like a typical podcast where there's sponsors, where there's these random advertisements that pop in. Because to me, you and I are having a conversation on each episode. We're conversing. And so it's not natural to, you know, pop in and, you know, the tree trimming service. Have you thought about trimming your trees lately? And here we go, blah, blah, blah. That interrupts the conversation and could take a listener out of the depth of a conversation that we're in and cause them to focus on something that's not even related to the content. And so while that has continued to be pushed in my face, I've rejected that every time. Also, there's been people that want to be on the podcast. We get pursued on a somewhat regular basis, like, hey, I'd love to be a guest on your show, but either they're non-dental, or if they are dental, I can tell it would be a marketing ploy. And that's not the point of the podcast. The point of the podcast is not to market to people. It's meant to be helpful. So I would say it's protected the podcast from a lot of decisions that I could have made along the way that I didn't. But it's also led to the subscription, because I think you and I both have had so many commentary with people afterwards that were like, oh, they want more. There is more that we could do. Or you and I will have this moment of dissatisfaction where we're like, oh, I wish we would have also said this, or I wish we could have encouraged him to do this. I wish we could provide that resource. And so it's pushed us into the subscription model to be able to be more help to people. It's like, yes, the podcast is still there, but for those that want to take it to the next level, we're willing, you and I are willing to put in a lot of extra time and effort to build some really good resources. And so I would say, yes, it has fulfilled the vision. And going forward with the subscription will definitely be more fulfilling.
Well, and I love hearing that, and that's what I was hoping you would say, because to me, it all started with what your vision was to help other dentists and practice owners. And so that being very clear with what your vision was there, what your goal was, you could have made money on this podcast 3 years ago, 2 years ago, but that's not, you weren't just grabbing at anything in your way. And I think that's things that, for say a new practice owner, it is tempting to go, oh, well, every other office is doing Invisalign. Maybe I should do Invisalign. Maybe I should do this. Maybe I should do that. And it's easy to get caught up in the noise. But if you go back and go, why did I start this practice? And if that was your goal, was to offer, everything under the sun, under one roof, then that matches your goal and carry forward. But for a lot of people, it was, I'm tired of having to be a jack of all trades and a master of none when I was an associate here, when I was that there, and I want to make sure my practice doesn't feel like I'm pushing all these services on my patients. So I think that to me was a really important parallel, because I've seen how you've kind of had to navigate through some of these decisions and choices. Yeah. And I felt like that's exactly what we have to do in our world. For sure. And then the next question I have for you, and then we can get back to dental offices, because I know you've got a lot to say here with this episode. But the other thing that I wanted to hit on was, how have you had to pivot? Because the listeners don't know, but you had random gallbladder surgery this year, like where you were out because your gallbladder needed to be addressed. Like, people didn't know that, but that led to a certain amount of pivoting. People didn't know, like, you've talked briefly about having to, how you've built your home, but I don't think people know that wasn't, it's not like you were sitting there going, oh, I've always wanted to build a home and this plot of land no, there was family circumstances that led you to that path, and has then, you've had some distractions from the podcast where maybe you would have done the subscription model a year ago, had things not. So can you talk a little bit about how you've had to pivot?
It's I think that's a good parallel as well. So I would say the pivoting with I think this is so practical for practice owners. Life gets in the way so many times, but life is a part of the path. And so I think there's so many things that I had dreamed for this podcast that really did get pushed off for a variety of reasons. Part of it was life for me, that just some curveballs that got thrown at us from my health standpoint, but then also an aging parent or in-law that was going to require some care. So we were having to look at moving and building and creating special circumstances for her. So we kind of went down this whole path that was extremely difficult to make that life transition. And so there were distractions for sure that came up in the process. And that didn't mean that the vision of the podcast wasn't getting done. It just meant some of the dreams and hopes that I had for it got prolonged a little bit. I could sit here today and say the same vision that I had 4 years ago when we started this is the same vision I have for the podcast. It's what I've always dreamed about. This subscription model has been something that's been on my mind for a couple of years, because I knew we could take it to the next level in supporting our listeners quite a bit more. But not only did life get in the way, I didn't have the right people in place. And so that's a component that a lot of people don't know about as well. I have wonderful assistants behind the scene, but my assistants are part-time. One of them's in nursing school, one of them's in college. They can only offer part-time. And so I knew that in order to properly roll out this subscription model, I really needed a full-time assistant that could it is a grueling process to come up with this subscription model, to manage it, to manage the platform. I knew that I did not have the capacity to do all of it on my own. And so my support person that I had in mind, honestly, for a year or two, had finally decided to make a career switch out of being a teacher. And my husband and I had my eye on her for a while, and then finally she had made the decision that we felt like she would eventually make. So once she came on board, which was in about May of this year, then the work started. It's like I had all the thoughts in my head, and I finally had a full-time person that could help me get to the actual subscription. So here we are, 6 months later, finally arriving there. And it's been 6 months of grueling work to actually get here. And so it's not just that life stalled the process, but it's also I had to find the right people to help me execute the vision, which is so much of the battle in the dental office as well. And so I think that's a key component as well.
I think that is the battle, right? Like, I think that's where a lot of us, when you start your practice or you buy a practice or whatever, and you get in there and you're like, how hard could this be? Like, it's like you look in the corner and in Dallas, there's 3 practices on every corner. Clearly it's not that hard, is the mindset, right? And then you get in there and you go in with your vision of, I'm going to, do everything right, and I'm going to treat people right, and I'm going to be a better boss than that person, so my staff will never leave me, and I will, you've got all these grand plans and schemes, and then things get in the way. Insurance suddenly stops paying for 2 prophies a year. Insurance, whatever. Oh, by the way, comes a pandemic. By the way, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, there's all this stuff that happens. And so I think, your vision, it's easy to get off course. It's also easy to get off course if you were never clear about your vision to begin with. And so I think, thank you for letting me put you on the spot there. But to me, as I was thinking about this and going, you've actually, yes, you're not a dentist, even though you could be, besides not knowing the drilling, like everything else about a dental practice. But it's the same things that you're going through. Yeah. So I have a colleague that started her practice 2 to 3 years ago. She's one of our listeners as well. And we were talking the other day, and I said, hey, do you mind, can I pick your brain here about when you started your practice, what did you have a vision? What was your thoughts? And she had been, in dentistry for 10, 12 years before that, and she'd been an associate and whatever. And she said, oh, I very clearly had a vision. I said, okay, well, tell me your vision. What was it? And she said, well, I knew that I had been in offices where I was treated really well, and I'd been in offices where I wasn't. And I was not going to let people feel the way I was made to feel. Mm. So she's like, so I'm setting a certain standard starting off with, I want my employees to feel seen and recognized. And so some of that, though, as I'm sure she's experienced, has been yeah, that's the goal that you want. But when you first start off, you're barely paying the bills.
Right.
So it might take you a couple of years to get that staff that you've always wanted. Anyway.
And to be able to treat them the way that you had envisioned. There's going to be, that's such a perfect example, because what you want, you can't financially do in the beginning to really show your gratitude and appreciation and all of that to your team. Now you can speak to them a certain way. There's little things, tangible things that don't cost anything that you can do to still execute a vision, but what you dream about may not necessarily happen for several years because there's just a barrier there that you can't financially afford what you have in your mind.
Well, and I think this is kind of back to your vision, where there's so many people starting a practice that they know. It's not just that we know they need your help, or a consultant or some guidance. They know, and they know about you. I mean, it's funny enough, now that I think about it, that's how when I met you, mm-hmm. I was just about to start my own practice, and I went to the county dental society's meeting, and you spoke there, and I remember going, man, I really liked her, but there's no way I can afford her. I'm just starting off.
Yeah.
And so fast forward 5-6 years later, when a friend of mine mentioned that she's a client of yours, and I'm like, I know exactly who you're talking about because I heard her at a study club. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking, man, wouldn't she be great to have to help before I set my own practice and muddle and fuddle and do a bunch of things wrong and then have to wouldn't it be nice to avoid those pitfalls and have somebody helping me go, by the way, think about this, by the way, think about that. But a lot of people can't afford that. And so, yeah, it took me, 7 years before I was a client, you know, it took time. And not that I knew that I wanted, I kind of forgot that there was help out there, but right in my moment of going, God, this practice sucks. What am I doing? And then like you came in and here we go. We've hit the ground running. So I guess the point of all of that, and then I'll let you get into more meat here, is your vision's key.
Yeah.
Remembering you've got to pivot. Remembering, like a lot of times we're not good at it. We got to be patient.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say taking it to a question that you asked me recently, which was, you said the phrase, are you on autopilot? And so it's almost like two components here. It's build the vision and know that there's going to be life circumstances, there's going to be financial barriers, there's going to be all these barriers to completing your vision. So it's like, don't lose the vision, but also be patient with the process. And then I think the other component to that is, are you even thinking about the vision anymore? Or are you just so much in that autopilot world?
Rut. Are you in a rut?
That you're just not thinking about it. It's interesting. When I was driving to this spot today, the fog was super dense. And so I had my car on cruise control. And at one point, I realized I'm not even paying attention. Like, I'm driving, and I've got a car that will actually steer and all of that for me. But I was steering. I was driving. But I had the speed control set. And the fog was super thick. And I really wasn't paying attention. I was thinking about us recording today. I wasn't really thinking about anything. Next thing I know, I felt my car slow down. And I looked down, I was like, why is my car slowing down? And it says, due to driving conditions, autopilot is automatically slowing down. And I thought about the question that you had asked, are you on autopilot? Are you not even paying attention? I could have, if I wouldn't have been paying attention, that car could have slowed down to God knows what on the interstate, slowing me down due to this fog. And if I had just sat there, just steering, just looking forward and not paying attention, I would have not been making progress towards my goal, my destination. And so I think that's really important to, not only are you at the beginning and are you building a vision that you can't quite attain yet due to whatever circumstances are preventing you, or the opposite. Did you set a vision? Do you think you're on the path, but you're not really paying attention? It's just you're moseying along and hoping that you're moving towards the vision. And I think both of those are key takeaways from this month. So we've come up, you and I have kind of talked about a couple of things that we both feel like would be really helpful towards people in either of those situations, whether you're still building a vision or whether you're not achieving your vision, or if you're on autopilot. I think both of these would get you out of any one of those situations. So what do you want to talk about first?
One that I think is kind of easier, and so practical and so almost kind of obvious, and yet it's one that I think gets overlooked very easily. And my question for our listeners, the challenge or whatever for you, is even down to the environment. Mm-hmm. Does your environment exude what you want out of your vision? And so what do I mean by that? Like in a pedo practice, like almost every office has some sort of theme because we're trying to make it kid friendly. It's almost easier for a pediatric practice to kind of at least fake the environment, if you will. And so I had to kind of go back and think, like, mine is a travel theme. Why did I pick that? Well, because in my vision, I didn't really have one. It's not like I was a huge soccer fan and sports, or the jungle, or the what do a lot of people do? The beach. Like, I like the beach, but it just felt so done to me. And so I was like, well, what resonates with me? Well, I don't know. I read a lot. Do I do books? Like, what, what I mean? Like, I just didn't know. And at that point in my life, I did like to travel. Yeah. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do is a travel theme. And then that kind of sparked, like, maybe we could do, like, when the patient comes in, you get a passport, and which we've never done all of that. It never quite came to fruition because it didn't really make sense with the flow. But so that was important to me. It was like making sure that the environment was fitting that theme. Yes. But then as a patient walks in the door, like, what does it smell like? Mm-hmm. What does it look like? What does it, like, all of those things go back to how, if you yourself are walking into your practice, like literally walking into your practice and going, I can't figure out what the vibe is around here. Well, then how are your patients going to figure out what the vibe is?
Yes.
So I think a lot of people are clear, like the ones that are like, oh, I want a spa-like environment. Okay, so then they tie a lot of things to the spa, like we're going to give you a warm washcloth. We're going to offer you a, weighted blanket, like whatever it is. But have you revisited that to make sure that that still lines up? Or did your weighted blanket break, half the beads have fallen out, your staff threw it away, and there is no weighted blanket anymore, and that was part of your vision?
Yeah.
So I think to me, that would be one thing, that whether you're starting off or you're a seasoned person, what do you feel like when you enter your practice? And is that what you want to be conveying?
Yeah.
To then, therefore, the customer service experience. So if your goal was to be like this high-end cosmetic practice and you've got like just volume of people coming in, that's not relaxing. Right. So have you gotten off path because you had bills to pay, even though the vision initially had been like, it's going to be like an organic spa and comforting vibe, but you walk in and the girl at the front is not greeting you kindly. The coffee pods are never refilled and your weighted blanket's broken. Like, have you kept up with what your vision was? So it's a very basic, like, forget getting into the visions of your type of dentistry, the flow of your day, etc. Does even just the physical space match your vision?
Yes, it's so important. And I think taking an active step to look at your practice in a different way. So a lot of times when we're just living our daily life in our home, in our practice, wherever it may be, we just stop seeing things. Stop seeing things, So it's interesting, when we were building our house, we lived in this little tiny house. And so I keep kind of going back there to get a few things. And when I walk in, I am like, I can't believe I lived in this. I never noticed this big stain on the wall. How did I know? It's such a tiny house. How did I miss this? And so then I'm getting out a cloth and I'm cleaning the stain. Or I walked in over the weekend and I was like, it smells in here. Like, what is this smell? Did we live in this smell and I'm just now realizing this? I'm like, oh my gosh, I got it. So I'm cleaning toilets and making sure that there's it's so interesting when you pull yourself out of a situation and you put a different perspective on and you go back in, you can see things that you never saw before. So one of my favorite things to do is a practice walkthrough. Sometimes when I'm first engaging with a client, I'm taking very close notes on what I see, even just little things that they may have overlooked. There's this huge scuff mark on the wall that everybody walks past every day, but I'm seeing it as a consultant for the first time, and I'm like, ooh, have y'all noticed this big dent in the wall right here? And so trying your best to walk out to your parking lot. Okay, I'm a patient. Maybe even bring somebody with you. Bring your friend, bring your wife, bring whoever, bring your child. Man, children will tell you exactly like it is. And go, okay, let's pretend like this is the first time that we're walking into our office. Let's pull into the parking lot. What do we see about the parking lot? Let's walk through the front doors and just take in every moment. You need to have a notepad and a pen with you when you do that, because you will note down several things that you feel like you need to change. Sometimes those are small changes. Sometimes your office is a physical representation of what you want it to be, but there's just a few things that you picked up on. You didn't realize there was a cobweb up in that corner. How did you never notice that? It's because you weren't exposing yourself mentally to that type of walkthrough. So I think definitely doing something like that is important. And if you can't pull out of the space enough, get somebody else to do it with you.
Well, I was going to say, bring in a mystery shopper, and like maybe it's your friend at church or your friend's husband. Hey man, do you mind if you're got an hour at lunch? Lunch may not work depending on, because you want, to me it would be, you could do it when the office is empty, but I think it's also equally valuable to do it when people are there. Yes. Because that's when things really get missed. So you coming in to a new client, or in our office, you're there once a month and you pick up on things that the rest of us don't. And the vision and what we're hoping that the patient feels when they come and they go, and you can easily point out and say, hey guys, y'all are wanting, this experience with the patient, but I could hear two assistants squabbling over there. Yes. I could see the front kind of getting, it took you, 55 seconds to recognize that patient walked in because the two of you had your head together. That's not the vision for this practice.
Yes.
So I would say a mystery shopper is if you can figure out like somebody who can come in and pretend to be a patient. I don't know.
I think that's a fantastic suggestion. And it can be anybody. Now, I would encourage you to think about picking somebody that is your target patient. I'd rather you do, if that's too hard for you and you're like, I don't know who my target patient is, you need to think about that. But if you're like, no, I can't get my target patient in, or I don't know somebody that's my target patient, that's fine. I'd rather you get somebody in there to take a look. But in an ideal scenario, you would go through and think, who am I trying to attract to my practice? So maybe I am going for this organic spa feel, and I love cosmetic dentistry in this beautiful space. Okay, go find a patient, a potential patient or a friend that is geared like that, and get them in your space, because they're going to view it differently than anybody else.
And be able to tell you if you're hitting the mark or not.
Yeah. Do they feel comfortable in that particular space? So that's one of our first steps, is really think about your physical space. I do think if you can, the precursor to that would be think about your target patient, think about your target day, what type of dentistry do you love doing, because that will then better inform the walkthrough. I call that a practice walkthrough, by the way. That'll better inform the practice walkthrough. But if nothing else, if that's too much, at least do the practice walkthrough.
Well, and I think that's such an important step to start with too, because the other area, if you're thinking about how do you want your day to flow, what kind of procedures do you want to be doing, who am I trying to target, that's going to help you make a lot of your marketing decisions right there. Yes. Too. So if we've not done our homework, or if we have had that vision, this is where going back and saying, okay, but I'm advertising in these like magazines, and that's the wrong, I'm looking for older women that want to fix their smiles, but I keep putting my ads in Dallas Child magazine. Like, that doesn't match up. Does it make sense? So I think that's gonna really help inform a lot of decisions you make. Yeah. And so again, if you have not really clarified your vision, or if you're in a rut where you're like, man, I'm 3-4 years into my practice and this is not what I had wanted. I just don't feel good. Why?
Yes.
So where have we gotten off path? Or if you're a seasoned person, there's a good likelihood you're on autopilot.
Yes.
And so before you get to the point where you're like, God, I hate my practice this month, I haven't had much joy in a while, and starting and kind of revisiting.
Yes. Take a moment to pull out of that fog and really think about, am I on course? Am I where I want to be? Is this practice going in the direction that I ultimately want it to go in?
So if some of you guys are listening going, okay, I hear you, but I still need more direction or points of how do I do this? Fear not. In our newsletter, we will give you more written versions of start here, do this, do
ask
that.
Yourself this, it'll be step by step in that document. So yes, and that'll be for level 2 subscribers. So level 2 and 3, of course, but level 2. So that document will be there, and we'll walk you through how to do that, even providing a practice walkthrough as well. The other component that I think is critical to vision, like we talked about with the podcast and this whole subscription model, one of my big hurdles was I didn't have the right staff member to be able to help me fulfill this vision. I think a critical takeaway from this month's podcasts would be you need to evaluate your team. You need to make sure that we talked about the rotten apple earlier in October, and the rotten apple can prevent your vision from taking place. You could have the best plan in the world. You've done the practice walkthrough. You know your target patient, like check. But if you've got a team that's working against you, or you've got a team member that's working against you, that vision will not happen, or it will happen in a very delayed response, and it won't be very fun in the process. So I think a key takeaway is to evaluate team members.
So I've got a comment and a question. So my comment is, yes, that's exactly what happened with some of the rotten apples that I got rid of not too long ago. And so the case in point, I think I talked about it quite a bit in that one episode, but the person didn't want to take the time to understand the discount. Mm-hmm. And what did that lead to for us? We got rid of the discount. Well, when you go back to the vision, though, the vision is, how do we help our patients get the work they need, and how can we help them? And so by dropping insurance, I have kind of countered my own vision in a way, because now I'm able to help less people. And if the vision was to help more kids, so, we've had to have all those conversations and kind of go, where's my vision tweaked a little bit here? But at the end of the day, like, we weren't able to fully help our patients because I had one apple pulling against the rest because she refused to understand the concept. And therefore our reaction was, never mind, let's not do this discount anymore. But that was not the right thing to do for the practice.
Right.
And it was like, oh, it's not the discount that's the problem. It's you that's the problem. Bye-bye, you're gone. And now the discount's there, and we're able to continue and help our patients and help our practice. And so that's a tangible how the rotten apple really interfered with the vision in that example. The question I have for you is back to the age-old, yes, how do I get better staff? I don't have a choice. Nobody else applied. So I don't want this to tangent off. I know we've done several episodes on this topic previously, but just to kind of sum it up here, what advice would you give if somebody's like, this is what I've got?
So I would say you can always start looking to see, because I think sometimes we assume that there's nobody else out there until we take a look. Either we take a look because we have to take a look, or we take a look because we're curious. But you can always put a job post up and see, or you can put feelers out through your social network and see. And that can't, a lot of people are like, oh, but Sally will know. There's creative ways to make it anonymous where she wouldn't necessarily know that it's you. So I think don't assume that you can't start looking. Sometimes I think people assume that nobody's out there and they're not looking. Well, how do you know if I know word on the street, maybe there's nobody out there, but maybe your job post goes up and it just happens to resonate with the right person. Or in addition to that, why don't you put that job post up and be willing to look at people that you may not have looked at before? Maybe before you had this idea in your mind that you only wanted the best of the best, the cream of the crop from dental professionals. So they had to have 5 years of experience, and you eliminated everybody else below that. Maybe you missed somebody that because of that predisposed idea that you needed a experienced dental professional, you actually missed somebody that was on their way to becoming that dental professional, and you missed them. So I think first of all, put the word out there and start actually looking. And then second of all, reevaluate the parameters you've put in place to ensure that you're not eliminating really great people. Sometimes I find that there's such a fresh perspective to those that don't have all of that dental experience. And so give yourself the chance to at least meet those people. It doesn't hurt to at least meet them.
I would say, so I'm kind of countering whatever, but I would say it's still better to have the rotten apples gone. Like, we have seen that now, and I know I talked about it in the other episode, but like the people that are not aligned with your vision are helpful to a degree, but then where are they detrimental? Because they will be detrimental at some point. And case in point, like, again, knocking on my head right now, the other shoe could drop, but it has been such a nice environment the last 2 months now, and busy days have not felt like busy days. Like, you were in the practice just earlier this week, and you met with everybody individually, and you're like, the vibe is such a positive vibe right now. People feel like they can be productive. They're being more productive, but they don't feel the stress, and they're not tired.
Yeah.
And it's because the rotten apple's gone. So that's going to be because that's something for me where I'm always like, I need backup people. What if somebody doesn't show up? What if somebody quits? We need all these extra people. And I'm finding, at least right now, that it's actually easier than it's been all year. And we're 2 people down at the front in theory. And It's easier now because it's the right two people, not the wrong two people. So, so as far as figuring out, do you have a rotten apple? Can you give us some advice and tell me what we're doing for that?
I think that's a great point. So first of all, yes, I think the other thing is consider a life without that employee and know that you could probably get by without them, which is, I think, a very valid point that you're saying. But a lot of people don't know that person is a rotten apple. And so one key takeaway that I want to encourage everybody to do is I want you to solicit feedback from your team regarding each person. I prefer a written format. You're going to get the most honest feedback. It's not going to feel drama or catty to be talking about people behind the scenes. It's just a formal document that each employee fills out about each employee. So Sally would fill it out about Susie and Tammy, and Tammy would fill it out about Sally and Susie. And you are receiving this information, and they need to have the opportunity to answer questions about those employees. They need to talk about the main strengths of the employee, the weaknesses of that employee, anything that could be potentially irritating about that person. And again, you may not even know that you have it because you're living in your world, you're doing your life, you're chair side, you're not thinking about anything else but the dentistry, and all the while you've had a rotten apple that's brewing on the team unbeknownst to you. And because you have a nice, sweet professional team that doesn't tell you anything, you don't even know that it's there. So I think it's a really good security and safety step to do an employee engagement scale. And you don't necessarily have, if you don't have a team where you feel like you can share that feedback and make improvements, that's fine. At least use it for your information to make sure that you do not have a fungus growing on your team.
And so you were just in our office this week, and we'd happened to have everybody's engagement skills that we had just recently done. You were able to sit and talk with each person. Can you tell us a little bit about how those meetings
It's so
went?
helpful every time. And so what's interesting about the engagement scales is when you, like in your team, when we've removed the rotten apples, the engagement scales change because those rotten apple feedback forms are removed. They're not there anymore. And so previously, when I was sitting down, when we still had rotten apples on the team, there would be this theme to the engagement scale. So 6 or 7 people would say similar things. They would rate similarly. There's differences, but there would be feedback that was repetitive in nature.
So what you're saying is like 6 people rating Sally.
And
they were more or less in sync, even though 6 different people on the team are filling it out.
Yes.
Back staff is rating Sally, who's front staff, so other front staff are also rating Sally. So we see Sally from different angles
And still similar. Like she's being rated very similarly, maybe a few changes. Feedback. So there's a feedback section in the middle where they can write the greatest strength of this employee, the greatest opportunity for growth for this employee is, and the team members are filling this out for Sally. And so that would change a little bit. There'd be different comments said, but even then I could kind of pick up on a theme from those things. And so, but when the rotten apples were still on the team, there were these outlier ones. So I'd have 6 to 7 that were similar, and then I might have one, and this wasn't all the time, but I'd have one that was like rated real low. So Sally was rated, high scores for the most part. Sally can work on how she communicates with parents when she's frustrated. It's evident when she's frustrated. So there's, that was kind of a key theme that came up for Sally. And then you might run across one feedback form that's like dismal. Like Sally looks like the worst employee on the planet. Not really, I'm exaggerating, but much lower scores, harsher, criticism. And you're like, whoa, if you just look at that one feedback form, Sally doesn't look great. But if you blend it in with the rest, you realize, okay, Sally's doing a pretty good job, but she needs to work on these couple things. I say that for 2 reasons. Number one, the feedback is very helpful when delivering it to the employees. All the employees your employees really appreciate that feedback from their team members, and they take it and they're like, ooh, I am going to work on that, that thing that kept coming up. But what was interesting to me this time without the rotten apples is there wasn't an outlier. all the feedback for those 6 to 7 that were all kind of the same commentary, same scores, all of that. It was all within this median range, and there was no outliers. So I can gain something from that in that, first of all, the assumption is, because I don't know who fills out these forms, the assumption is the outlier forms that I would come across were the rotten apples. So that is critical. When you're looking at those forms, yes, you're wanting to see how Sally's doing, but you're also wanting to realize, does this handwriting keep saying real negative things about people? Oh, that may be my rotten apple, right? Not always, but it's one thing to take into consideration with those employee engagement forms.
So that's interesting, because I would have thought the rotten apple would have come up with like everybody rating this person like, you know, she's friendly to the patient, but then she doesn't do this, like things that I wouldn't see necessarily, but they're seeing. But you're saying it's even as the rater could be the rotten apple.
Yes.
Okay, interesting.
Yes. So to me, you get twofold evaluation. You are getting these engagement scales back on each employee so that you can kind of see what is the general theme about each employee. But also, if you're doing this, like we're encouraging you to do all at once, like if you haven't been doing this, now's the time. Evaluate and make sure that your practice is on the vision path that you want it to be on, and that you've got the right team to help you get there. So if you're collecting these all at once, you're going to see a pattern there that I think is really important. A pattern for Sally, but then also is that same handwriting super duper critical for each employee. And then you're like, okay.
There's a pot stir in here.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think the other thing that's kind of the obvious thing here, but one thing that has been a relief for me to see is an employee that initially was like, like everybody's kind of rating her like, you know, and now that the rotten apples are gone, everybody's like, you've stepped up, you're amazing. So it's like, she wasn't showing us her potential because the rotten apples were wearing her out. And so the question was, are you also a rotten apple?
Yeah.
And maybe she was, and she's turned it around, or maybe, who knows? But it's just funny to see if I had looked at her engagement scale from February versus her engagement scale from last week, it's like she's a different employee.
Yep.
So,
yeah.
And now we're on track, and I'm going to savor it for as long as I can.
Exactly. Yeah, I think those, if nothing else, because there was so much content in October that I feel like was just like, it's so practical and yet so hard to do. And so I think
content from our podcast. Is that what you're saying?
Content from our podcast. There's so much that is, it's like we can all agree. Vision is so important, yes. But what do I do with that information? And oh my gosh, yes, rotten apples, man, that's so hard. But what do I do? So to me, if we can solve those two things and make sure that we've got a clear vision, we've looked at our practice, is it actually looking like it's our vision? And then I would say the second component is figuring out if you've got the team to get you there. Protect your team from a potential rotten apple. And if you've been in the fog on autopilot, not thinking about your team, please, our encouragement would be to hit the pause button, evaluate your team, make sure that you don't have a fungus growing there that you need to take care of. All right. Bonus episode. Done.
Awesome.
As we conclude today's episode, I'm sure you have lots of ideas running through your mind. Be sure to jot those down and just begin to take action on something. Of course, if you have any questions or topic suggestions, be sure to message us through the subscription platform, Patreon, and we'll be sure to respond to you. Thanks for being part of the Managing Dental Drama community.